Nestled between the verdant mountains and hollers of Appalachia lie West Virginia's southern coalfields. Today a mostly rural region home to about 200,000 farmers and miners, a century ago, this bucolic land witnessed one of the most pivotal but overlooked events in American history. A century ago, the federal government failed in its responsibility to protect the rights of its most vulnerable citizens. And a century ago, those citizens took it upon themselves to uphold their own rights, facing down one of the cruelest corporations in our history. This is a story of the worst excesses of capitalism and the most valiant acts of courage and defiance. It's the story of a ragtag army of coal miners who took on the company and nearly won. This is the story of the Battle of Blair Mountain. In 1890, the Norfolk and Western Railway connected the south of West Virginia to the outside world. First settled a century before by hardy farmers of Scotch-Irish descent, the area had a bad reputation in the north. The infamous Hatfield-McCoy feud of the 1870s had solidified the new state's lawless and primitive image. With the arrival of the railways, wealthy northerners gained access to the southern coalfields that stretched across Kanawha, Mingo, and Logan counties. The land here was mostly owned by small farmers, but through a combination of buyouts and coercion, the Cabin Creek and Stone Mountain coal companies gained control over much of the area. Those farmers seeking stable employment gravitated towards the new company towns, planned settlements owned and operated by the companies. What awaited them at the company towns, however, was worse than they could have ever imagined.
Basically, the conditions were most akin to slave labor. The miners would oftentimes not get paid. They would be locked into the coal camps. If they got paid, it would be in company scrip, which was money only good at the company store.
The Cabin Creek and Stone Mountain coal companies exercised total control over every aspect of their workers' lives. The miners woke up at dawn and labored in the cold, dank mines until after nightfall. Those who survived the frequent accidents and explosions that plagued the mines often died in their 40s from an excruciating disease known as black lung, caused by the inhalation of toxic coal dust. Well aware of these dangers, the coal companies continued to force their miners to work long hours without any sort of safety precautions. When the miners were paid, they were just given scrip, tokens valid only at the town's company store, where inflated prices ensured that workers were perpetually in debt. As West Virginia coal began to fuel the technological and societal advancements of the Industrial Revolution, the workers who produced it endured conditions evocative of the worst abuses of slavery.
It's like these little coal camps were a microcosm of absolutely unfettered capitalism. What happens when there are no rules? That's what happened in southern West Virginia.
By the 1910s, the outbreak of World War I had caused the demand for coal to rise, and with it, miners' paychecks. But when the war came to an end, the companies sought to preserve their profits by cutting their workers' wages back to even lower levels than before. And when the United Mine Workers, or UMW, organizer Frank Keeney arrived in Mingo County to unionize its workers, the Stone Mountain Company hired the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, an elite group of armed union busters, to evict the new UMW workers and terrorize their families. On May 19, 1920, 14 Baldwin Felts agents were leaving the Mingo County town of Matawan after a long day of doing Stone Mountain's dirty work. Matawan was the only independently governed town in the county and had recently elected a pro-union mayor, Cable Testerman. When the agents arrived at the town's train station, Mayor Testerman had his police chief, Sid Hatfield, serve them an arrest warrant. Agent Lee Felts responded by drawing a submachine gun and shooting Mayor Testerman in the stomach at point-blank range. A group of armed miners, recruited by Chief Hatfield as backup, responded with a volley of their own. The ensuing shootout left a dozen dead, both agents and miners. With the cold-blooded murder of Mayor Testerman, the miners' simmering resentment and rage, stoked by daily abuses and injustices, finally exploded. 95% of Mingo County's miners joined the UMW, calling a strike that crippled operations. Local sheriffs, paid off by the companies, worked hand in hand with Baldwin Felts agents to suppress the union, arresting miners simply for congregating in a blatant violation of their constitutional right to assemble. But the wave of fury unleashed by Testerman's murder would prove unstoppable. In August of 1921, miners from across West Virginia held a massive protest in the state capital of Charleston to demand the recognition of the UMW, the release of the detained miners, and the restoration of their constitutional rights. If not, the miners proclaimed, they would march to Mingo, occupy the coal fields, and defeat the companies once and for all. By now, the West Virginia Coal War had attracted national attention, but the federal government still did not step in to protect the rights of its citizens. Instead, President Warren G. Harding submitted to pressure from the coal companies and issued a threat to the miners: disband and return to work, or face the full might of the United States Army. But on that very day, Don Chafin, the pro-company sheriff of southern West Virginia's Logan County, had his men murder 2 Union miners in cold blood. The miners' ad hoc leader, Bill Blizzard, realized that even if they surrendered, no government official, not even President Harding, would stand up to the companies or protect their rights. With 10,000 armed miners in tow, Blizzard began his march to Mingo, a march that would go down in history. By the morning of August 31st, Blizzard's men had reached Blair Mountain, a promontory halfway between Charleston and Mingo. Sheriff Don Chafin and the Baldwin Felts Agency had deployed their forces there, aiming to put a stop to the march before it overran the southern coalfields. When the two sides met, the confrontation quickly became bloody. The miners divided into 2 parties, making their way towards mountain passes in the north and in the south. By the afternoon, the miners had broken through Sheriff Chafin's lines. In desperation, he called on President Harding to bail him out. Federal troops arrived at Blair Mountain on September 1st, but even Don Chafin could never have expected the miners' response.
The miners literally cheered when the federal troops came in because they thought the troops were coming to bail them out. They thought the troops were coming to support them in their fight for rights.
Not a single shot was fired between the miners and the army. Still believing that the government that had abandoned and shunned them would step up to fulfill its responsibility and protect their rights, the miners, on the brink of victory, halted their attack. To their dismay, the federal troops merely sent the miners back to their camps and let Don Chafin's men go scot-free. The miners hadn't exactly lost at Blair Mountain, but they certainly hadn't won. In the aftermath of the battle, however, the UMW renewed its efforts to organize the southern coalfields, drawing on the memory of Blair Mountain to encourage workers to join the Union. By the early 1930s, President Franklin D. Roosevelt's pro-union policies facilitated the UMW's long-awaited expansion, and the miners of the southern coalfields finally won the rights that they had fought for so tirelessly. Today, the coal industry is on the decline in West Virginia, increasingly taking the unions with it. But the spirit of freedom and defiance represented by the miners at Blair Mountain still remains somewhere within our national psyche. And with efforts by companies like Starbucks and Amazon to prevent their workers from organizing, and the federal government's increasing inaction in the face of corporate might, perhaps that spirit will emerge again to challenge growing inequality and to unite America's workers behind a vision for a better future. When the government fails in its responsibility to protect the rights of its own people, the people must stand up to defend those rights themselves. This was the ideal that inspired the miners at Blair Mountain to defy the forces of capital and fight for a better future. And it's the ideal that must inspire us today.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong.